You have been losing power your entire life, and you never even realized it. Every time you texted first, every time you explained yourself when no one asked, every time you rushed to prove your value to someone who had not yet earned the right to doubt it, you gave something away. Something invisible, something most people will never understand the value of. It did not feel like weakness. It felt natural. It felt like loyalty. It felt like love. It felt like being a good person. But underneath that feeling, underneath that warmth, something else was happening, quietly, slowly, without your awareness. You were training people how little you cost. You were showing the world that your presence requires no effort to keep, that your attention is always available, that your loyalty can be taken for granted, that you specifically can be lost without consequence. And once a person believes they can lose you without consequence, they will never fear losing you at all. This is where power dies, not in betrayal, not in conflict, not in loud, dramatic moments of rejection. Power dies in the small surrenders, the unnecessary explanations, the desperate check-ins, the moments where you gave access to your energy before it was earned. You have been doing this your entire life, not because you are weak, but because no one taught you the truth about what makes a person valuable in the minds of others. Tonight, that changes. Because tonight you are going to understand something that the most powerful people in history understood, something that Niccolo Machiavelli documented more than 500 years ago, watching kings rise and fall, watching alliances form and collapse, watching men of extraordinary potential destroy themselves, not through failure, but through availability. The most dangerous thing you can do in any relationship, personal, professional, social, is make the other person feel certain they will never lose you. Certainty destroys desire. Certainty kills respect. Certainty removes the one psychological force that keeps another human being invested in your presence. That force is fear. Not fear of violence, not fear of pain, but fear of loss. The quiet, invisible terror of imagining a world where you are no longer in it, where your calls no longer come, where your energy is redirected somewhere else, where someone else receives what you used to give. That fear, when installed correctly, is the most powerful form of influence that exists between human beings. And tonight, you will learn how to install it. There is something you possess that is more valuable than money, more powerful than status, more dangerous than any weapon ever forged. It is your attention, not your words, not your actions, not your achievements. Your attention, the raw, directed energy of your conscious focus, is the most precious resource you carry into every interaction you will ever have. And most people give it away for free. They pour it into people who have not earned it. They flood their attention into relationships that return nothing. They spend the most valuable asset they own, like it costs nothing. And then they wonder why they are treated like they cost nothing. This is not an accident. It is a mechanism. The human brain is wired to assign value based on scarcity. What is rare is treasured. What is abundant is ignored. What requires effort to obtain is protected. What arrives without effort is discarded. When you make your attention unconditionally available, you have removed its scarcity. You have flooded the market with something that should have been rare. And in doing so, you have destroyed its value, and your own along with it. Think about the people you have respected most in your life. The ones who commanded rooms without demanding it. The ones whose approval meant something because it was not guaranteed. The ones whose presence felt significant because it was not always there. What made them powerful was not what they did. It was what they withheld. Their attention was selective. Their energy was protected. Their presence was conditional, not on rules, not on manipulation, but on whether the situation and the person had earned access to what they carried. That selectivity created rarity. That rarity created value. That value created a psychological gravity that pulled people toward them, not away. You have the same capacity, but you have been spending your attention like a man who does not know he is wealthy, distributing it carelessly, giving it to those who have not earned it, flooding rooms with your presence before the room has demonstrated it deserves you. This ends tonight, because once you understand that your attention is currency, that where you direct your focus is a statement of worth, you will never waste it the same way again. And the moment you stop wasting it, the world will begin to feel its absence. And in that absence, it will begin to fear losing it entirely. More than 500 years ago, in the city-states of Renaissance Italy, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli sat in political exile and began to write. He had watched princes command armies. He had watched rulers lose empires. He had witnessed the full spectrum of human power, its construction, its collapse, and the precise psychological mechanisms that determined which leaders survived and which were destroyed. And what he discovered was not what most people expect. The most powerful men he studied were not the most aggressive. They were not the most charismatic. They were not the most beloved. They were the most controlled. Control of their reactions, control of their access, control of who received their attention, their loyalty, their presence, and under what conditions. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But this line, famous as it is consistently misunderstood. He was not advocating for cruelty. He was not prescribing aggression. He was describing a psychological reality that he had observed in every court, every battlefield, every negotiation he had ever witnessed. Fear is more stable than love. Love is conditional on emotion. Love shifts with mood, with circumstance, with the passing of time and the arrival of temptation. But fear, specifically, the fear of losing something valuable that is anchored in self-interest. And self-interest does not shift with mood. A person who loves you may leave when their feelings change. A person who fears losing you will stay because the calculation of loss remains constant regardless of how they feel on any given morning. Machiavelli watched rulers destroy this dynamic constantly. They gave too much. They showed too much need. They made themselves too available to those they sought to influence. And in doing so, they converted their power into weakness. Because once the other party knew they were irreplaceable to the ruler, the balance of power inverted. The one who needs most loses most. This principle governed the courts of Florence. It governed the thrones of Europe. It governed every alliance, every treaty, every marriage contract signed in ink and power. And today, 5 centuries later, it governs your relationships, your career, your social world, and every interaction where power is silently being negotiated. You are always in a negotiation. The question is whether you know it. Machiavelli knew it. The men who survived knew it. And tonight, so will you. Power does not come from being needed. Most people believe it does. They pour energy into becoming indispensable. They offer more, give more, sacrifice more, believing that the person who gives the most receives the most in return. But this is not how power operates. Power comes from being valued, and there is a fundamental difference between being needed and being valued. A thing that is needed is used. A thing that is valued is protected. When you make yourself needed through constant availability, you have positioned yourself as a utility. And utilities are not respected. They are consumed. They are taken for granted. They are replaced the moment something more convenient arrives. But when you make yourself valued through selective presence, through emotional restraint, through the demonstrated willingness to exist fully and completely without requiring anyone's validation, you have positioned yourself as something rare. And rare things are not consumed, they are pursued. This is where most people fail. They mistake being needed for being powerful. They mistake attachment for influence. They mistake desperation masked as devotion for genuine magnetic pull. True power is quiet. True power does not announce itself. It does not plead. It does not justify. It does not explain why it deserves to stay. It simply demonstrates through its controlled presence, through its unshakable calm, through its willingness to walk away, that it answers to no one's approval. And paradoxically, it is this refusal to seek approval that generates the most approval. It is this willingness to be lost that makes others most afraid of losing it. Power is quiet. Power is selective. Power is controlled. Power does not need the room. The room needs power. And the moment you stop needing the room, the moment you walk in with the full, internal certainty that your departure would be the room's greatest loss, not yours, everything shifts. The dynamic shifts. The energy shifts. The way people look at you, speak to you, think about you, it all transforms. Because you have changed the fundamental question in their minds. You have replaced, how do I keep them interested? With, how do I keep them? That single psychological shift, from them wondering how to hold your attention to them, wondering how to preserve your presence, is the shift from powerlessness to power. Everything in this video is designed to engineer that shift. When you withdraw your availability strategically, deliberately, without explanation or apology, something specific happens inside the minds of those around you. Their brain begins searching for answers. The human mind cannot tolerate unexplained absence. It is wired for pattern recognition, and when a familiar pattern breaks, when someone who was always available suddenly is not, the brain does not accept the absence quietly. It investigates it. It obsesses over it. It replays every recent interaction, searching for cause. This is not weakness in others. It is neuroscience. The brain's reward system, specifically the dopamine pathways responsible for anticipation, activates more powerfully in the presence of uncertainty than in the presence of certainty. Consistent availability produces no dopamine response because it is expected. But inconsistency, strategic, controlled inconsistency, creates a neurological state indistinguishable from craving. Their certainty becomes uncertainty. Their confidence in your permanence begins to erode. Subtle thoughts emerge. Have I done something wrong? Are they pulling away? What changed? These questions are not comfortable. They are activating. They force a re-evaluation of your value, and that re-evaluation almost always concludes in your favor, because the mind inflates the value of what it fears losing. This is why people want what they cannot fully reach, why forbidden things feel more desirable, why the person who seems slightly beyond your grasp seems more worth pursuing than the one who is always, immediately, completely available. You are not manipulating anyone by applying this principle. You are aligning yourself with how human psychology actually operates, and you are using that alignment to ensure that others perceive your value accurately, rather than underestimating it through your over-availability. Their emotional state shifts. Where there was comfort, there is now alertness. Where there was passive certainty, there is now active attention. Where you were background noise, always present, never noticed, you are now the dominant thought. You have become the unanswered question in their consciousness. And an unanswered question cannot be ignored. This is how obsession is created. Not through dramatic displays, not through emotional declarations, but through the quiet, confident management of access, knowing when to give presence and when to withhold it, knowing that absence, deployed correctly, speaks louder than any words you could offer. They begin to fear losing you. And a person who fears losing you will do what it takes to keep you. They will invest, they will adjust, they will begin to see you, not as guaranteed, but as something that must be maintained, earned, and continuously deserved. That is the shift. That is the mechanism. And you created it not by doing more, but by doing less. This is where transformation begins. Not in theory, not in philosophy, but in the specific daily behaviors that signal power to others and to yourself. You stop explaining yourself when no explanation was requested. The powerful do not justify their choices to those who have not earned the right to question them. Explanations signal that you require approval, and you no longer do. You stop initiating from a place of anxiety. There is a difference between reaching out from abundance because you genuinely desire connection and reaching out from fear because silence has made you uncertain of your standing. Learn to feel the difference. One builds connection, one destroys power. You become selective with your presence. Not absent, not cold, not unavailable, in ways that seem calculated and performative, but genuinely, internally selective, because you now understand that your presence is valuable and should be received by those who deserve it in moments that warrant it. You practice silence where you once filled space with noise. Powerful people are comfortable with silence. They do not rush to fill pauses. They do not speak to manage others' discomfort. They allow the quiet to settle, and in that quiet, they project something that words would only diminish: calm authority. You become emotionally unreadable in moments of pressure. When someone challenges you, tests you, attempts to provoke a reaction, you do not provide one. Not because you feel nothing, but because you have developed the mastery to decide what you show, when you show it, and to whom. Your emotions become something you wield, not something that wields you. You practice strategic withdrawal, not punishment, not distance as a weapon, but the natural, healthy withdrawal of a person who has a full inner life, who has other priorities, other investments, other things that matter. When people sense that your world does not revolve around them, they begin, instinctively, to want a larger place in it. You stop over-investing in those who under-invest in you. Match energy. Not perfectly, not rigidly, but accurately enough that you are never giving significantly more than you are receiving. Because over-investment signals need, and need signals weakness, and weakness destroys the fear of loss. These are not games. This is architecture. This is how you build a life in which people pursue you rather than the other way around. There are people who will attempt to break this discipline, not always with malice, sometimes with need, sometimes with their own unresolved patterns. But the effect is the same. They will try to pull you back into the emotional reactivity, the constant availability, the anxious overinvestment that you are leaving behind. The first enemy is the guilt architect. This person senses your withdrawal and immediately frames it as abandonment. They make your boundaries a betrayal. They make your selectivity a rejection. They are skilled at making you feel that your growth is harming them, and they depend on that guilt to maintain access to your energy. Recognize them. Do not debate them. Simply continue becoming who you are becoming. The second enemy is the provocateur. They exist on your reactions. They need you emotional, destabilized, responding, because a responding person is a controlled person. They will push. They will challenge. They will say exactly the thing most calculated to produce a response. And the most devastating thing you can do in response is nothing. Absolute, calm, collected, nothing. Your silence is their defeat. The third enemy is the comparer. They will point to others to make you feel insufficient. Other people are more available. Other people give more. They are attempting to use social pressure to reset your standards to their convenience. Do not adjust to their comfort. People who cannot respect your standards were never truly invested in you to begin with, only in the version of you that served their needs. The fourth enemy is yourself. Your old patterns, your old fears. The voice that says silence means rejection, that withdrawal means abandonment, that if you stop being maximally available, you will be replaced, forgotten, discarded. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is conditioning. And it has been wrong about your value for years. Guard against these forces not with aggression, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who now understands what makes them genuinely irreplaceable. Your emotions will resist this transformation. They will demand reaction. They will demand expression. They will flood your system with urgency in moments where strategy demands stillness. They will tell you that silence is coldness, that restraint is cruelty, that you are doing something wrong by not responding, not explaining, not giving the reaction that the moment seems to demand. Do not obey. Emotional mastery is not the absence of feeling. It is the sovereignty over what you do with what you feel. It is the gap between stimulus and response, and the ability to inhabit that gap long enough to choose your move, rather than be moved. This is a skill. It is trained, not inherited. Begin with the breath. In moments of emotional activation, when someone says something designed to provoke, when silence from another person triggers your anxiety, when an interaction seems to demand an immediate response, you breathe. Deliberately, slowly, you create 3 seconds of internal space between what happened and what you do next. In those 3 seconds, you remember who you are becoming. You remember that your reaction is your currency, and you do not spend currency without purpose. Begin monitoring your impulses before acting on them. Notice when you are about to explain unnecessarily. Notice when you are about to text first from fear. Notice when you are about to break your own silence to relieve someone else's discomfort. Notice and then choose differently. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, you are training the nervous system toward power. Every time you choose silence over noise, you are building the internal architecture of someone who cannot be destabilized. Every time you manage your emotion rather than expressing it impulsively, you are becoming more powerful. This is not suppression. This is elevation. The goal is not to feel less. The goal is to operate above what you feel to be the director of your inner life rather than its victim. You are no longer the person you once were, the person who explained unnecessarily, the person who initiated from anxiety, the person who gave their attention freely, their presence unconditionally, their power without thought or protection. That person is being replaced. You see differently now. When you walk into a room, you no longer ask, "Do they like me?" You observe, you assess, you decide where your presence serves and where it does not. You think differently now. When silence meets you from another person, you no longer spiral. You return to yourself. You trust your value. You understand that the absence of their engagement says more about their internal state than about your worth. You operate differently now. You are building your life from the inside, from values, from standards, from the quiet certainty of someone who knows what they bring and refuses to discount it for the comfort of others. You have become someone who cannot be controlled, not through aggression, not through dominance, but through the most unassailable form of power that exists, complete and absolute possession of your own inner world. People sense this. They cannot articulate it, but they feel it. There is a quality in those who have achieved this sovereignty, a stillness, a calm, an unspoken certainty that the human instinct reads as significance, as value, as something worth protecting. You have become the kind of person whose absence is felt before they even leave the room. That is not arrogance. That is the natural consequence of knowing your worth and refusing to negotiate it. You have become, in the truest Machiavellian sense, someone who is feared to be lost. And that changes everything. From this moment forward, everything changes. You no longer react impulsively. You act strategically. Every word you choose is chosen. Every silence you offer is deliberate. Every moment of access you grant is a decision made from power, not fear. You protect your attention, because you now understand that your attention is not a courtesy. It is your most valuable possession, and you distribute it only where it has been earned, only where it is returned, only where it builds rather than diminishes. You protect your emotional energy, because you now understand that those who drain it without contributing to it are not allies, they are losses, and you do not invest in losses. You protect your mind, because you now understand that the world will always attempt to install its narrative about your worth. And you have decided that the only narrative that matters is the one you have written for yourself quietly, powerfully, without anyone's permission. Machiavelli knew that the greatest power is not seized. It is cultivated. It is built through restraint, through patience, through the long game of someone who understands that their scarcity is their strength. You now understand this. You are no longer available to everyone. You are selective. You are no longer reactive to everything. You are controlled. You are no longer afraid of being lost, because you have become someone worth fearing to lose. That is the shift. That is the transformation. And it begins now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances change, not when others begin treating you better. It begins with the next conversation, the next moment of silence you choose instead of the explanation you used to give, the next time you sit in your own power quietly and let the world adjust to you rather than adjusting yourself to the world. This is Machiavellian power, not cruelty, not dominance, but sovereignty. The sovereignty of a person who has decided finally, fully, completely, that they will never again be the one afraid of being lost. If this changed something in you, if something in these words landed differently than anything you have heard before, comment below. I am in control.